The Appalachian night has a way of playing tricks on your ears. Out here, when the moon slips between the clouds and the ridges breathe fog, every sound feels older, wilder. But this sound is different. Locals say it starts as a deep rumble, somewhere between a growl and a scream, then climbs, stretching out across the valley until it rattles your chest. It doesn't sound like coyotes. It's not the bark of a dog, and the timber's too low to be a fox. The first time anyone mentioned it was back in the late 80s, Monroe County, West Virginia. A hunter said he heard something howl from across the hollow, so powerful it made his flashlight flicker. Thought it was a wolf at first, but the region hasn't seen wolves in over a century. Since then, the reports haven't stopped. Every few months, someone new steps out on their porch in the dead of night and swears they've heard it. The long, bone-deep howl echoing through the mountains. Wildlife officers have checked. Scientists have analyzed audio clips, but no one can agree on what's making that sound. And the strange part? Every time someone records it, the howl changes. Different pitch, different rhythm, sometimes even overlapping voices, as if something out there is calling back. Some say it's a rare predator that survived extinction. Others whisper it's something far older, something that's been in these woods since before we arrived. Whatever it is, it's not wolves. So what's howling in Appalachia? Let's find out. Hey there, I'm Ranger Kenny, and for the past few months, I've been chasing a mystery that's been echoing through the Appalachian Mountains for decades. Dozens of locals have recorded it, biologists have analyzed it, hunters, hikers, and even park rangers swear they've heard it. A deep, unearthly howl that no one can quite explain. In this video, we're going to break down what's really going on. First, we'll listen to the most credible reports and recordings that have surfaced, from the hollows of West Virginia to the ridges of eastern Kentucky. Then, we'll dig into the science. How sound travels in mountain terrain, what known animals could be responsible, and why none of the usual suspects quite fit. We'll talk to experts, look at acoustic data, and even analyze a few field recordings I captured myself during some long, sleepless nights in the woods. By the end of this video, you'll have a clearer picture of what's really howling out there, and why the mystery refuses to die. So grab your headphones, because this one's best experienced with your ears wide open. Let's start where it all began, with the first reports of something howling deep in Appalachia. The first official record of these howls dates back to 1987 in a quiet stretch of Monroe County, West Virginia. A hunter named Paul Hensley was out before dawn, setting up tree stands for deer season. He told local reporters that just as the sun started to rise, he heard a long, chest-shaking cry echo through the ridge. Not once, but 3 times. He swore it wasn't a coyote, said he'd hunted those for years, and this was lower, deeper, and somehow sadder. His quote still shows up in old clippings from the Bluefield Daily Telegraph. It sounded like a big dog that wanted to be human. That report kicked off a wave of similar stories throughout the late 80s and early 90s, mostly in southern West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, and southwestern Virginia. Locals called it the Hollow Howler. Some old-timers said it reminded them of tales their grandparents told, about mountain spirits that cried out before a storm or death in the valley. By 1999, amateur radio operators and night hikers began swapping cassette recordings of strange noises. Deep, throaty howls that didn't match any known species in the area. One tape, supposedly captured near Breaks Interstate Park, became legendary. It was passed from one campfire to another, even played on a late-night AM radio show called Voices of the Hills. And then came the 2003 Eastern Kentucky incident, one of the most documented cases to date. A hiker camping near Red River Gorge recorded a sustained 25-second howl on a handheld camcorder. Wildlife officials analyzed the sound and found something unusual. The fundamental frequency was around 260 hertz, far below what a coyote could produce, and too smooth to be an owl. Despite that, the case was quietly closed. The official explanation? Undetermined animal vocalization. Since then, the pattern has held. The howls come in waves, mostly between 2 and 4 a.m., often just before a change in weather, and nearly always in remote hollow. Alright, before we start thinking cryptid, let's pump the brakes a little, because a lot of scientists and wildlife experts believe there's a far simpler explanation hiding behind those eerie sounds. The first and most obvious theory? Coyotes. Coyotes are all over Appalachia now. They've been steadily expanding their range eastward since the mid-1900s. Their howls can echo through valleys and morph in strange ways when the wind shifts. Some wildlife biologists suggest that what locals call the hollow howler could just be a pack of coyotes with one unusually deep-voiced male, and the surrounding terrain makes it sound massive. Sounds plausible, right? But here's the problem. Coyotes typically howl in higher registers, between 500 and 1,500 hertz. The mysterious Appalachian howls? Some recordings hit as low as 250 hertz, way below what a coyote's vocal cords can produce naturally. So unless the mountains themselves are somehow tuning the sound downward, that explanation doesn't fit perfectly either. Then there's the echo theory. The idea that overlapping howls might just be one animal's cry bouncing back from a ridgeline miles away. Acoustic scientists do point out that Appalachian terrain, with its dense forests and steep valleys, can distort sound dramatically. It can bend, bounce, and even layer noises, making a single howl sound like several. One study from the University of Tennessee in 2011 found that low-frequency sounds below 300 hertz can travel over 5 miles in hilly terrain, and reflections from the opposite ridge can reach the listener delayed by up to half a second. That delay might explain why some recordings sound like two animals calling back and forth. But there's still a snag. If echoes were the full story, every recording should have a consistent delay pattern. Yet some don't. A few clips have overlapping frequencies that can't be the same source. Another explanation some skeptics lean on is domestic dogs. Specifically, large breeds like Great Pyrenees or Mastiffs kept on farms. In rural areas, their howls can carry for miles, and under the right conditions, say cold air at night with temperature inversions, the sound can travel way farther than you'd expect. But again, those tones tend to wobble. They're irregular and breaky. But after decades of reports, the data doesn't fully land on any one explanation. The frequencies are too low for coyotes, too organic for machines, and too consistent to blame on echoes alone. So if it's not those, then what are we hearing? To find out, we've got to look a little deeper, into the science of sound itself, and into some of the wilder, but still possible, biological theories. Let's get a bit more technical. To understand what's howling in Appalachia, we have to start with one of the most overlooked clues. Not the creature, but the sound itself. You see, Appalachia isn't just a mountain range. It's a giant natural amphitheater. Its valleys and ridgelines form echo chambers that can stretch a single cry into something that sounds otherworldly. Sound scientists call this the canyon effect. When a low-frequency sound, say under 300 hertz, bounces off opposing slopes, it doesn't just reflect once. It reverberates, layering on itself like ripples in a pond. That's why a coyote's short yip can transform into a deep, mournful howl that sounds like it came from a beast twice its size. But even that doesn't explain everything, because the Appalachian howls don't just echo. They carry harmonics that suggest something alive, something biological. When audio engineers ran these recordings through spectrograms, basically sound heat maps, they found smooth transitions between frequencies, the kind you'd expect from a living vocal tract, not a machine. And here's where it gets interesting. A 2018 study out of North Carolina State University analyzed long-range vocalizations from hybrid canids, specifically coyote-wolf crosses, sometimes called coyowolves. These hybrids can produce lower fundamental tones than either parent species, sometimes dipping into the 250 to 300 hertz range. In other words, right in line with the Appalachian recordings. But if coyowolves are the culprits, that raises another question. How far have they spread? Genetic surveys in Virginia and West Virginia between 2016 and 2020 found traces of hybrid DNA in a handful of wild canids, but not enough to confirm stable populations. That means if these howls are coming from hybrids, they're either passing through or surviving in very small, isolated numbers. Ghost populations, basically. Another theory? A throwback. The red wolf. Once native to Appalachia, red wolves were declared extinct in the wild by 1980, but they're known for long, deep howls eerily similar to what's been recorded here. There have been scattered reports and even a few grainy trail. Biologists are cautious, and rightly so, but history has proven surprises happen. In 2017, researchers rediscovered a population of New Guinea singing dogs thought extinct for half a century. Their howls? Low, harmonic, and hauntingly human-like. So could something similar be hiding in the deep hollows of Appalachia? Maybe not likely, but not impossible. What the science tells us so far is this: the howls are real, they're organic, and they sit at the edge of what we know about the region's wildlife. And that's exactly where the line between explanation and mystery starts to blur. To explore that line, I wanted to hear it for myself, not from tapes or secondhand reports, but out there in the dark. So I packed up my recording gear and went into the field. There's only so much you can learn from other people's stories. At some point, you've got to step into the dark yourself. So one cold night in late October, I packed up my recording gear, a parabolic microphone, a thermal camera, and more coffee than I'd like to admit, and drove deep into the Monongahela National Forest. The goal was simple: stay quiet, stay still, and listen. Around midnight, I set up on a narrow ridgeline about 5 miles off the main trail. The moon was a thin silver sliver, just enough to outline the trees. I remember the silence most of all. Appalachia has this thick kind of quiet. It's not empty, it's heavy. You can almost feel it pressing against your ears. For hours, nothing. Just wind, the occasional owl, the creak of trees shifting in the cold. Then, just after 1 a.m., it happened. A deep, resonant note rolled across the valley. Low, long, and steady. It wasn't close, but it was big. I hit record immediately, checked my levels. The mic spiked at -3 decibels. with a fundamental frequency around 270 hertz. That's low. Like, you feel it in your chest, low. 10 seconds later, a second call, slightly higher pitch, echoed from what sounded like a ridge 2 miles east. Two distinct sources. It was subtle, but you could hear it. A call and a response. I stood there for over an hour, recording every sound, marking timestamps, checking wind direction. The thermal camera didn't pick up anything obvious. No large shapes, no movement beyond small animals. But what struck me most was the rhythm of it. The howls weren't random. There was a pattern. 5 to 10 seconds of silence between them, as if one side waited for the other to finish. When I played it back later, something else stood out. Harmonic layering. The low voice wasn't a single tone. It had overtones, natural modulation, and microshifts that machines don't make. Whatever was making it, it was alive. Around 3 a.m., the howl stopped. The forest went dead quiet again, like someone hit mute. I packed up my gear. There's only so much you can learn from other people's stories. At some point, you've got to step into the dark yourself. So one cold night in late October, I packed up my recording gear, a parabolic microphone, a thermal camera, and more coffee than I'd like to admit, and drove deep into the Monongahela National Forest. The goal was simple: stay quiet, stay still, and listen. Around midnight, I set up on a narrow ridgeline about 5 miles off the main trail. The moon was a thin silver sliver, just enough to outline the trees. I remember the silence most of all. Appalachia has this thick kind of quiet. It's not empty, it's heavy. You can almost feel it pressing against your ears. For hours, nothing. Just wind, the occasional owl, the creak of trees shifting in the cold. Then, just after 1 a.m., it happened. A deep, resonant note rolled across the valley. Low, long, and steady. It wasn't close, but it was big. I hit record immediately, checked my levels. The mic spiked at -3 decibels, with a fundamental frequency around 270 hertz. That's low. Like, you feel it in your chest, low. 10 seconds later, a second call, slightly higher pitch, echoed from what sounded like a ridge 2 miles east. Two distinct sources. It was subtle, but you could hear it. A call and a response. I stood there for over an hour, recording every sound, marking timestamps, checking wind direction. The thermal camera didn't pick up anything obvious. No large shapes, no movement beyond small animals. But what struck me most was the rhythm of it. The howls weren't random. There was a pattern. 5 to 10 seconds of silence between them, as if one side waited for the other to finish. When I played it back later, something else stood out. Harmonic layering. The low voice wasn't a single tone. It had overtones, natural modulation, and microshifts that machines don't make. Whatever was making it, it was alive. Around 3 a.m., the howl stopped. The forest went dead quiet again, like someone hit mute. I packed up my gear. Back home, I transferred everything from my recorder. 4 hours of silence and about 42 seconds of the unknown. The first step was simple. Visualize it. I loaded the audio into Audacity and generated a spectrogram, basically a picture of sound. It maps frequency on the y-axis and time on the x-axis, with color showing intensity. Right away, the pattern stood out. The howl had a clear, solid fundamental frequency at 270 Hz, and two clean overtones above it, around 540 Hz and 810 Hz. That's unusual. Coyotes usually show more scatter, lots of breaks and pitch slides. Wolves show a single smooth fundamental, but this had both stability and harmonic complexity. Then I overlaid it with reference calls, verified recordings from gray wolves, red wolves, coyotes, and even domestic dogs. None of them matched perfectly. The red wolf was closest, nearly identical in pitch and duration, but its harmonics didn't line up exactly. The Appalachian howl had a longer tail off, like something with larger lung capacity or resonance chamber. I also compared it to known coy wolf hybrids, courtesy of a 2018 North Carolina State Research dataset. Again, close, but not perfect. The hybrids peaked around 320 Hz. Mine never went above 280. For curiosity's sake, I checked mechanical sources, train horns, mining ventilation shafts, even distant turbines. Machines tend to show even spacing between harmonics, a sign of artificial resonance. The howl didn't. Its upper harmonics fluctuated ever so slightly, the way muscle tension changes in a living throat. In short, it was organic. But there was another twist. When I zoomed in on the waveform, there was a faint delay, a second, quieter echo arriving 0.47 seconds later. That matches perfectly with the echo delay predicted by the University of Tennessee's 2011 study on sound reflection in mountain valleys. So yes, at least part of what I recorded was bouncing, literally, off another ridge. But the key takeaway? The echo doesn't explain the source. Whether it was a coyote, a hybrid, or something else entirely, that deep, primary tone was coming from one real echo. When I started digging into this story, I thought I'd find a simple answer. Maybe coyotes, maybe echoes, maybe just folklore stretched thin by generations. What I found instead was a reminder of how alive these mountains still are. Appalachia holds sound the way the ocean holds light. It bends, it carries, it hides things in its depths. The recordings I captured, the data I analyzed, they point towards something natural, but not entirely familiar. Maybe it's a remnant red wolf still clinging to survival where we least expect it. Maybe it's a hybrid, born of change, nature adapting in the shadows while we look the other way. Or maybe it's something older, something that's been crying out in these hills since before any of us were here to name it. Every generation that's lived in Appalachia has heard it. The coal miners, the loggers, the families tucked deep in hollers. That same sound rolling through the trees at night. They gave it names, told stories, passed warnings. We call it a mystery. They called it a neighbor. And maybe that's the lesson here. Not that there's a monster in the mountains, but that we still live close enough to wildness for the unknown to find us. Somewhere out there, something howls in Appalachia, and it's not wolves. It's the mountains, reminding us they're still listening.